Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of LHS Club Advanced Class on Tuesday evenings. This is the month of September 2016. The topic is openings. So any questions you have, whether as white or black, this is a good time to ask any questions you might have. So before I start, any question from previous sessions or about openings that you play? Maybe we can address those first before I go over a great game in history of chess. Good. You got the opening figured out? Perfect. Okay. So the game I'd like to show you tonight is one game that as we're getting close to the end of the month, obviously advanced class also, I discuss more advanced topics. So this is not one of those openings that you pretty much wipe your opponent off the board immediately. This is a game that the story of this game is very famous in chess literature. Nigel Short against Timman. This game is famous because of the long walk that the white king took with all the pieces in optimal positions, and this game is famous as the most famous king march in the history of chess. So Short is white, John Timman is black. This was played in a major tournament back in 1991, one of the major tournaments then. Short was open at e4. Black in this game, John Timman from Holland, he decided to play Alpine defense. So I know I already got Mitch's attention. So e5, white played, knight d5, d4, d6. Alpine is a hypermodern setup. Anytime in an opening, somebody, usually black, gives the other side more space advantage, and he's kind of cramped but solid, that means it's a hypermodern setup. So knight f3, there are many continuations at this point. Bishop g4 is playable, e6 is playable, and g6 is also playable. And that's what Timman played. So white played sensible. c4 was perfectly playable, but bishop c4 is more common in this position. Black played knight b6, and white played bishop b3.
No, I played d5 at this point to block off that bishop.
Okay. d5 has its advantage and disadvantage. The advantage is that if you get this light square bishop out and trade it with this knight and play e6, you have a French pawn structure where your bad bishop is out, and you're striving to play c5 and expand on the queen side of the board. But French pawn formation and fianchetto bishop usually don't go together. In the long term, these squares are going to be weak, seriously weak. You're just pushing too many pawns and the dark square will be weak, especially if these dark square bishops later on get traded. So that's this is a very resilient setup, but it's not very common. So in this game, black played bishop g7, and black is planning to play pawn takes, and if knight takes, trade these two, and queen takes. So to avoid that, white played queen e2 with the idea of pawn takes, pawn takes. Black played knight c6, and white castled. So far so good. And black castled. This is one of those lines where both sides often castle king side. So again, black's strategy is the same. To bring this bishop out to g4, trade it with this, play e6, and maybe even d5 or trade. So white played h3 so that bishop would not have the g4 square. So Alpine defense is a kind of setup that black often plays in the center or on the queen side. In other words, black's strength is on this side of the board, queen side. And white's strength is sometimes in the center, sometimes on the king side. So this is another one of those space gaining moves by black, and of course threatening to win a piece with a4. white to play a4, stopped it, and black played d takes e5, and white played d takes e5. So we have made exactly 11 moves. Right around this time, it's a good time to pause and assess the position. Who is better, how, why, which side of the board each side should be playing. So one way to tell about the space advantage is to divide the board in half and see who has pieces and pawns on the other side of the board. So this pawn, which acts as a wedge in black's position, depriving black from putting pieces in these squares, is a very powerful pawn for white. So white has a little bit of a space advantage. Black is a little bit cramped. All the black pieces in these 3 rows except that pawn. And white has a pawn on the 5th, on the 4th, and white has just a little bit more space. It's black to play. When you have a cramped position, the number 1 rule is to trade pieces. So black played knight d4, forced trading the knights. White played takes, queen takes. So black's queen is very active for now, and the immediate threat is this pawn. So white's move is forced, rook e1, and black to play. Black does not have too many good moves at this point. Bishop f5 could fail to g4, and so black locked in that light square bishop. This is the biggest weakness in black's position right now. This is his terribly bad bishop. White to play, what should he do? He played knight d2. Knight would be ideal on f3, as x defends this, controls this square. So black played knight d5. He's trying to move this knight out of the way so he can play b6, bishop a6, or bishop b7 and activate the dark light square bishop. And now knight f3, and black played queen c5. White to play, like I said, white's strength is on the king side. So white's goal now is to trade this dark square bishop with this dark square bishop. So how can he do that? Queen e4, queen h4, bishop h6. You see, once you play with a plan, it's not too hard to find moves because you're playing according to your plan and it's just a matter of executing it. So queen e4. And of course, black is hoping to trade queens because black is cramped. Black played queen b4. And of course, white should not trade pieces. So what should he do to avoid trading? Queen e2 is not a good option because black will play b6, followed by bishop a6 or bishop e7, like I said.
Maybe bishop takes knight.
On the other hand, he is planning to shift the queen to the king side. And like I said, black pawn structure, black French pawn structure with a fianchetto bishop. So these squares are extremely weak and he needs to take advantage of it. But in order to do that, he must have this bishop traded.
Can you move the pawn up?
If he moves the pawn, he loses the bishop.
Right, that's why I'm saying bishop takes knight first.
Well,
And then the queen can't take the queen, he's got to take back the bishop. And then the queen can move to a dark.
Bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes, and this bishop comes to life beautifully. And black, at the cost of a pawn, would have very active pieces, not to mention the bishop pair advantage. So black will have full compensation. So that is not possible. So bishop c4. You see, white just needs one more move to kick the queen from this square, right? So for now, this bishop holds temporarily. Black to play, knight b6. Now, something will be traded, either the bishop for knight or bishop moves queens. Of course, you don't want to trade queens. So white simply defended it. And of course, black was happy to trade because he gets white's bishop for his knight. So black happily traded it, takes, pawn takes. So yes, there is a little bit of a compromise on white's pawn structure, But compared to what's coming, the threats that are coming, it doesn't mean much. You see, there are multiple threats here. Bishop a3 is one.
Ooh.
And these double pawns are not horribly bad. Double pawns in or close to the center, they're not bad at all. So there are multiple threats. Black has no time to play b6 because he will lose the rook. What should black do here? Is black to play now? And black saw this bishop a3 threat coming, so he played rook e8. Reasonable move. Again, this is problem piece for black in this game. And white wants to make sure that that bishop does not get developed. So what should white do now? He wants to prevent black from playing bishop d7.
Rook to d1.
Right. If black plays bishop d7 followed by bishop d6, his worst piece at c6, it becomes his star piece. So yes, this is a beautiful preventive move. Even though white has a space advantage with multiple threats coming, first things first, and not to let that bishop get developed. Rook d1.
But rook e6.
Uh,
And then he can push the pawn at b7.
yes, he could do that. But that'd be too many moves. In the meantime, white will manage to do something. You see, if white manages to trade this dark square bishop with this pawn structure, with a queen here and knight here, the game is almost over. So black can be in serious trouble. So black played queen c5. And it's white to play, and white continues with his plan. What was white's plan here?
Queen h4.
To trade the light dark square bishop, so queen h4. And now finally black got a chance to pay attention to the development of the light square bishop. So he played b6. Okay, both bishop e3 and bishop a3 are very tempting, right? And as to which one of these is best in this particular position, that really says something about the plan of the player and his understanding of chess. So you have to take into consideration that black may play queen c6 followed by bishop b7, a powerful battery against f3 and g2 squares, right? So white chose bishop e3. After all, his goal is not to keep this bishop here. He wants to play bishop h6. But before he moves the bishop here, he wants to make sure that he drives this queen away from this great square and then move the bishop to trade bishop. So as soon as
Queens, queen e7 then?
on queen e7, he would play bishop here. And on queen back, bishop f6. So black played queen c6. Black is hoping to create some accident on this long diagonal. So after queen c6, now bishop h6. You see the subtleties? Many masters in this position, they immediately go with the plan of bishop h6, while the black queen is very well placed on c5. So this shows a great understanding of Nigel Short, who played bishop e3, drove the queen to this square, and now bishop h6.
But the rook's not at f8. He can just retreat the bishop to h8.
Right, right. And then white keeps building, for example, knight g5, with the idea of bishop takes, king takes, queen check. So black did play bishop h8. Black must keep the bishop because these squares are extremely weak. And this is the only piece that can control those squares. So far, so good. It's white to play. And white played rook d8. So already black has a back rank weakness. With the bishop moving to h8, black's back rank is very weak, and he already cannot trade rooks. So what should black do?
Bishop b7.
b7.
Played. Rooks are connected, and now rook a d1. So with rook a d1, is white threatening anything? Yes, something serious. Rook takes a8, and if rook takes, rook check.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And then
So it's black to play, and black realized his back rank is weak, so voluntarily now he moved the bishop back to g7. This is an example of good chess. You force your opponent to make moves that is to your advantage. So bishop came back to g7. Okay, so this is a situation where all the white pieces are in optimal position. So how do you improve your position? This is a middle game right now.
If you're anticipating equity trading, then you want to get your king ready for endgame.
Right. So there are many options here. Trading rooks are very tempting, but since white is controlling d8 square, white played rook d7. You see, black cannot challenge white on that square anymore. He avoided trading, and at the same time, and you might say, okay, what if he moves the bishop back to c8?
Oh. Oh.
Then what?
I was thinking taking the bishop and then the dark square weaknesses and stuff, but
Maybe.
yeah, takes, bishop F.
Well, the knight's frozen, that's for sure. So you can't do anything
Yeah, it's
else.
interesting.
Black moved the bishop back to f8
Okay, yeah.
because white's threat was queen f4
Okay.
and knight g5 coming next. So he knows this square is very weak. He defended it, rook f8. And now it's time to do a little trade. Bishop takes, king takes. So thanks to this battery here, white's knight cannot go to g5. So how can white continue from here?
Check.
One of the rules of the metagame is, the most important rule of the metagame is piece optimization. You constantly want to improve the position of your pieces. There's a rule called worst piece first. Find out which one of your pieces is worst or least active, move that first. Which one of white pieces would you say is least active?
The king?
King.
Okay, well, short of king, he still has room for improving his piece positions.
Well,
Once he ran out of that idea, then he pays
the
attention to the
knight
king.
can only go to one square now.
Right.
Yeah, which is even.
But this rook can still improve. Rook d4, he played. You could say this move is not necessary. Whatever white was trying to do, he could probably do it. So rook 1 d4. Black to play, rook a e8. So worst piece first, developed. So as you see, black's pieces are bunched together over here. He cannot really push any pieces or pawns, and black is just holding, waiting to see how white is going to come up with a killer punch. So he improved the position of the queen. Queen f6 check, king g8. Okay, now what? In metagame, or any phase of the game, when all your pieces are in optimal positions and you cannot improve their position any better, think of how the pawns can help you.
h4.
Wouldn't it be nice if white somehow bring this pawn to h6? Checkmate.
G4.
h4.
That's the plan. h4. Of course, black sees this plan, so how can he prevent that? Forced. h5. Okay, there's another rule that says when your pieces and all your pawns are in optimal position and you cannot improve their position any better than what they already are, you pay attention to the king. How can the king participate in the fight? Because so many times in metagames and in openings and endgames, especially in the opening and metagame, we hide the king, make sure it doesn't get hurt, make sure all the pieces are supporting it. You just hide the king and don't let the enemy do anything. So, first world champion Steinitz has a famous saying, "I'll make my king fight," which means in the end game. In the end game, king is as good as a rook. Remember this. This can really help you if you can. So in the meantime, black is pretty much stuck over here. He can't move anything. If he moves the king to h7, this pawn drops. if he moves this rook away, white could play this rook here and bring another rook double up on the 7th. This rook is stuck for now. But wouldn't it be nice if white somehow could bring the king over here? That's a plan. Next phase is for white to bring the king up. So I played king h2. So I'm sure Timman didn't think much of this move. Timman had no idea that he's going to be on the receiving end of a brilliancy in chess history. So he didn't think much of this move. He moved the bishop back to c8, and he's waiting to see what white can do. And white played king g3. And black moved the rook back to e8.
He's going to go to h6 for mate.
So only when the king got to f4, black realized that, oops, he wasn't just trying to improve his king position. His king is a fighter. He's trying to come to h6 and checkmate. This game is famous as the most beautiful king march in chess literature. So black desperately is trying to do something now. Now he realized that he can't just move the rook back and forth. He has to do something active. So he did something that he should have done earlier. So played bishop c8. So guess what white's move now was here?
g5, 'cause I don't think it's
King g5. He can afford to give a whole rook there. And of course, black cannot afford to take it because king here. Just in time. You see, if 2 moves earlier, instead of rook back to c8 and e8, black had played bishop here, that would have been more effective. But now it's too late. And if black plays king h7 to prevent this king maneuver, then this pawn falls. Rook takes, and king will go here anyway. Checkmate is coming anyway. No way to prevent it. So the lesson for us is, when you have some advantage in the opening, which in this game was a space advantage, just try to pull it into the middle game and improve the position of pieces the best that you possibly can. And as you can see, and when your pawns cannot help either, he tried to go to h6, but black prevented it, then you think of a king move, king maneuver. Of course, not in all the games you are able to maneuver the king up the board. In this case, there was a beautiful route here that he was able to, but not in all the games are possible. But often you can find a situation where you can improve your pieces to the point where you end up winning. What a beautiful game. Black resigned here. So, hope you enjoyed it. Now we are going to see another game. Soldi, you want to set up the board? Thanks. Oh, wait, never mind. Yeah, go ahead. Well, he's going to edit it, so you're not going to be in this. This game will take a little bit longer. Maybe I should go over a short game first.
Support by giving me Boba money.
All right, you can have an extra pie. Okay, so the second game that I have for you guys is from one of my games against senior master Richard Ketchum. This was back in Texas in one of the Continental Chess Association, which they still run major tournaments all over the country. The interesting thing in this game, I was black, he was white, is that he opened with f4. In your chess career, whether you play friendly games or competitive tournament, there are times that somebody plays an unusual move in the openings that you have no idea what to do. So if you stick to the opening principles, you never go wrong. Just develop, put your pieces in optimal positions. And I have a good memory actually playing against f4. International master Tim Taylor, he wrote a book on Baird's opening. And he dedicated several pages of that book to a game that he beat Grandmaster Kotchian, which the game happened to be in this club. as part of the LA Masters tournament a few years ago. So that was another occasion that I had to play against this. And I just fianchettoed both my bishops, and then I decided which pawns to put in the center. So I happened to win that game, and that left a good memory for me. I usually have a good record against f4 as black, because I play systems that usually they're unusual. So white's opening preparation is pretty much out the window. What I usually do these days, like I said, I fianchetto both my bishops, and then I decide which pawns I want to put in the center. In this game, I played a little bit more conventional. I started with d5. He played knight f3. I'm a hyper-modern player. Hyper-modern players usually fianchetto one bishop, maybe both. So I played g6. He played e3, bishop g7, d4. When you see the pawn structure d4, f4, this is called a stonewall attack. White has a powerful bind on e5, which eventually is going to move the knight there. And this is a very tough, very resilient way that white could play. It's really hard to crack this system. So just to give you a little background. But for now, I'm just trying to finish up my openings. First things first. This structure already has a resemblance to certain defense.
King's Indian.
With King's Indian, this pawn is on d6 usually. With a pawn on d5, it takes a different name. Grunfeld. So black's structure is Grunfeld setup, which in this situation happens to be a little bit more active than King's Indian defense. So white played bishop d3. This bishop is usually not well placed on d3. Bishop on d3 against the fianchetto pawn structure on the king side is not so powerful, because in effect this bishop is biting on granite, pawn that is defended with two pawns. g3 with the idea bishop g2 would have been more effective to hit on the d5 pawn and hoping to open this diagonal, one diagonal instead of two diagonals that it has now. So this is already strategically a little bit misplacement of that piece. So black castle and white castle. Okay, so we got our opening out of the way. I have no idea what I'm doing as far as memorizing opening moves. I'm just finding moves one at a time in this opening. And it happens quite often in your own games too. You just have to be creative. So strategically, you want to break this structure, this pawn structure. So what's the way to go?
I guess b6, c5.
Okay, right. That was a normal way to continue, but I'm not that normal. So I played with c5 immediately. And you see it actually pays off very nicely later on. So I'm offering him a pawn that he can take. So here he played b3. One idea is to prevent c4. Another idea is to play bishop b2. And this structure also has a name. Of course, with the pawn here, usually. This is called Kali system b3, or Zukertort Kali. But with the pawn on f4 is even more effective. So he's got an ideal setup as far as development of his pieces. So on b3, black continues to play actively. b6, with the idea of defending this pawn, would have been perfectly good continuation. But I felt like this pawn takes pawn cannot be that good for him. So I play knight c6. And the correct move in this position was to play a3. So many people, they underestimate this very powerful move. a3 with the idea of bishop b2, and bishop diagonal is open, or will be open sooner or later. He plays c3. Now the move b3 and c3 don't go together too well. If b3 to fianchetto the bishop, then c3 blocks the bishop. So it's not a very harmonious way of developing your pieces. That a3 was the move. So after c3, I continued with developing my pieces. Bishop f5. This move looks unusual in the sense that he can take and give me double pawns. But double pawns in the close in or around the center are not that bad. Yes, we have the half-open g file, But I saw this as a plus just by moving the king and rook g8 and open a new front against the white king side. So this move is not as bad as it looks. It actually has a lot of pluses to it. And the correct move for him, I felt, was queen c2, forcing me to take, or I could have even played e6 and capture with the e pawn. But he took immediately, and of course I took with the g pawn. And now he played d takes c5. So he won a pawn that is not defended, and black doesn't seem to have a way to get his pawn back. How can I get my pawn back? Whether I play knight a5, if he plays queen a5, b4. So I cannot take the pawn back. But now black plays very actively, thanks to this pawn that has been removed from d4. First, starting with knight e4. This has all the hallmarks of a good move for black. Of course, with an immediate threat, with a battery on this. But he has a good response too. Knight d4. And of course, I'm never going to take here because knight takes, c pawn takes, and he has a beautiful pawn, solid pawn ahead, not to mention that 3-2 majority on the queen side of the board. So I never plan to take. What I did was knight d4 also threatens this pawn. So e6 is forced and good. And now he played b4. So how can we assess this position that came out from the opening so far? White is a solid pawn ahead, but this diagonal, compare the position of these dark square bishops. This bishop is clearly superior. Not that he can do anything immediately, not yet. Of course, in this case, now if I play knight bishop takes, he's going to take with the e pawn, not with the c pawn, because this pawn drops. But I'm not willing to give up this bishop. This is my star piece that I'm hoping to create some accident with it later on. So there are times, sometimes in the openings, you sacrifice a pawn, but it's not enough. You feel like you need to sacrifice a second pawn. Beko Gambit is a perfect example of it. For those of you who play Benko, black sacrifices the b5 pawn, then the a6 pawn next. And then the advantage becomes huge if his opponent becomes greedy and try to win pawn after pawn. So it's white just played b4 and black played rook c8. So you see, I'm sticking strictly to opening rules. I developed my last undeveloped piece. What's my strategic plan? Hoping to do some accident around here. Depends on how he continues. So he played bishop b2. Again, this bishop is far superior than this bishop hemmed in by his own pawn. So here's the moment to sacrifice another pawn and open up lines. This is the only way black can destroy this pawn structure. So I played b6. He played knight takes c6, rook takes c6, and b5. This move I totally did not expect. On the obvious move of, say, rook c8, he plays b6. And these pawns have become very powerful. This is when you have to outsmart a master. Whatever he's expecting, you should do the opposite. Of course, he was expecting on rook takes, bishop a3, and forking the rooks. So, well, if I take with the knight, I lose the rook. So I have to do something with the rook. So I played exactly what he was expecting me to play. No, rook takes c5. It's worth it to get a pawn and his dark square bishop for a rook, because later on this bishop becomes a monster. His counterpart would be gone, not to mention that this pawn also becomes a target for the rest of the game, along with this knight here, along this diagonal, along this file. So I happily took the pawn, and he happily played bishop a3. So he's only seeing things for the moment, but I'm seeing things down the road, which this area is going to be huge problems for him.
You take c3 here?
No.
How about knight takes c3?
I'll play rook takes b5. I felt like this pawn is very important This weakness is there. I'm going to come back and win this pawn. But for now, it's very important to win that b5 pawn too. So I play rook takes b5. Sure enough, he took here. And because I'm trying to shift my queen to the queen side, like on c5 eventually, I took with the queen.
Get pressure on C3.
So he played a4, gaining some space and breathing room for his rook. Naturally, rook c5. And now knight d2. You see, he's stuck here. I'm on this 3 times, and if he somehow defends it with queen here or rook there, I can still win the pawn. So he figured, since he's losing the pawn, he might as well hoping to trade these knights. This knight is very powerful. The only white piece that can challenge this knight is his knight. So play knight d2. And of course, I was not planning to play. I took knight takes c3.
You could, oh yeah, you don't want to give up your bishop. I was going to say you could do knight takes knight and then bishop takes c3.
Right,
But then,
right. I felt like this bishop is better than that rook.
yeah.
Well, he's
Okay.
gonna-
so
I know
you
it's-
don't
No,
want to
he's
give it
gonna
up
give
for
back
that
one of
rook.
his rooks for that bishop.
Right.
Okay.
So this is one of those situations where I felt like this 3-point piece is better than that potentially active 3-point piece
Yeah.
is better than this 5-point piece of his. So knight takes c3. He played queen f3. And now it's just a matter of improving my position. Queen c8. This move discourages rook to c1 because there's immediate check and capture. So he cannot challenge me on the only open file in the game. Queen c8. We have made exactly 20 moves, and black has such a nice strategic position that the game would be over in 6 moves.
Ooh.
You see, it's very difficult to find a plan for white. How should white continue this game? Usually you strike at your opponent's weakest link. Where is black's weakest link seems to be
B7.
the half open G file.
Okay.
If he somehow put a queen and a rook on this file, black is lost. So his plan is fine, G4. I would have done the same if I were white. He played G4. He wants to force open this file, and it's just a matter of king H1 and rook G1. After all, he's got all 3 majors still. So his move is fine, G4. So it's black to play. He has to play very actively. Queen A6. Okay, what is the point of this move?
Oh, so you could check at e2, or
Check doesn't do anything.
You don't really want the you don't want the rook.
My goal was to play queen d3 and see what he's trying to do with the knight. Queen active. He played rook ae1. He prevented the knight and queen from this square.
And he was thinking,
So he's put all his eggs in one basket, hoping to create some accident on the king side.
You better take first, I think.
Okay, so what should black do? Active play.
Active play.
well, didn't you say
The game is over in 5 moves.
Didn't you say queen to d3?
That was my earlier plan, right?
Oh.
But now I felt like I can win a pawn also.
Okay.
And with the idea of trying to stop him with knight e4 possibly.
Did you take the F5 pawn?
He took the f5 pawn. G takes f5. What should black do? The threat is obvious. King h1, rook g1, checkmate.
He has to take the pawn.
You could, oh, you can't force trade queens yet.
Yeah, if I don't take this pawn, he's going to take here. Pawn takes f5, and I can have trouble on the f file. So I have to capture here. Yes, I know this pawn structure looks ugly. IQP here, double pawns here, but I don't see how he could possibly do something. Especially that it seems that now, with the pawn removed from the e file, from the 6th row, if I station this rook here,
Yeah.
he has no attack really. So that was my idea. So sure enough, he's going for that checkmate, rook f2. And about the only effective way for black to resist and prevent white's attack,
C6.
rook c6. He played queen h5. Now, of course, he's trying to go in after this pawn. So first, I station my rook where it belongs,
Check.
rook g6, and he played rook g2. Now what? He's hoping to take this pawn and give me some back rank checks. Black to play, what should he do? This move is so powerful and effective that he resigned on the spot.
Queen E4.
Queen on the knight will take.
Queen e4, there's a knight here. What is it?
Queen c2.
What does queen c2 do?
Threatens to take the rook and then take the knight.
Very
Ooh.
good.
Protects the pawn and threatens the knight.
Knight.
That's it. Queen c2.
And if he moves.
The knight is frozen because if knight moves, checkmate here. The defensive rook actually has an offensive role too. And what can he do? How can he defend the knight somehow? The threat is queen takes knight. Rook is frozen on this diagonal, on this file.
That's good.
Can he defend the knight somehow?
I don't know if
He could give
How
up
about
his
rook takes rook first?
Well, on rook takes rook, I'll take, say, with the f pawn, and notice he has no perpetual. Oh, h pawn is perfectly fine too, and still he cannot defend the knight, right?
Now, but then, there's
Rook
still
takes,
knight.
pawn takes,
Now you tempoed the queen.
right?
So how do you save the knight?
He can't. His queen is under attack, and queen cannot defend the knight either, so he will drop the
Stop
knight.
That knight
But he
is
loses a
beautifully
knight.
placed.
So, what should he do in this position?
Resign.
That's what you did.
That's what he did. There's just no good moves. He can't afford to move the knight. He can't afford not to move the knight. Stuck. So I would say, I would say the main reason that I won this game so nicely, even though he's still up in material, is that I played it strategically. I sacrificed an exchange that he was after. I felt like when your opponent is following a faulty plan, and you know it's faulty, let him continue. Let him go with the plan. At some point, he would realize that it doesn't work. And this is the moment of truth finally in this game.
Well, you also had a bishop and 2 for the exchange, so it's
Yeah. So,
bishop and 3.
well, he has a rook and he has a rook for that bishop.
Yeah, but you have these 2 passers for that.
Right.
And that's
Thanks to b5 pawn that I captured and the a4 pawn, all of a sudden c3 pawn that I won,
it's more
all of a
than
sudden it
compensation.
becomes too much. It's more than enough comp. Hope you enjoyed it, and we go to the second hour now.
Okay.